UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Teixeira is in 10 days. And my God, is this an awful, awful, awful card. Now, today we're going to be specifically talking about all the fights on the main event. Sorry, not the main event, the main card. And we're going to talk about why they're all terrible and why a lot of these are just bad matchups and just not very exciting. As we'll see throughout this list, many of the fights on this card are fighters who are really old, past their prime, and are nowhere close to even title contention. And there's also quite a few low-ranked and mostly unranked fights. In fact, the highest ranked contender in this is Derek Lewis. He's the only person in this entire card who's ranked in the top 10 of any division, and it's heavyweight. The worst fucking division. Anyway, we're going to talk about all the bullshit with this card. Let's first talk about the false advertising. Now, in this poster, it does not show it in this particular poster, but there's a poster like this advertising this card for Nashville, UFC Nashville. And it says next to Derek Lewis, 9 first-round finishes. And right next to Teixeira, it says 8 first-round finishes. Now, more than half of those first-round finishes for Derek Lewis were between like 2011 to 2017. More than half of those. In fact, I think only like 1 or 2 finishes have come since then. Teixeira, on the other hand, he has 1 UFC win, and it's against Justin Tafa. So he has no quality wins, and that's the only KO he has within the UFC. More than half of those KOs are against like B-League from a really shitty fight promotions, against like 40-year-old competitions who are like 6-13 or something. Most of his opponents. In fact, one of his opponents, Teixeira, was 4-15, and a couple of them were just 2-1. Young people starting out their careers, or people just journeymen who never made it. A lot of his finishes come from that. So kind of a fraudulent, undefeated record, but, we'll have to wait and see how his talents translate in the UFC. Anyway, Derek Lewis, on the other hand, not only is Derek Lewis headlining a card in 2025, he's 40 years old. He's 2-3 in his last 5 fights. And this is a matchup that UFC 318 could have used on like the main card opener or the prelims. Anything to stack that card more. To give fucking Dustin Poirier a better fucking send-off. Instead, we're stuck with this shit where Derek Lewis, ranked number 9 during this, is taking on a guy who's probably ranked, number 48 unranked, so in all the rankings, probably like 48 or 50. Now, moving on to the next fight, we have Wonder Boy versus Gabriel Bonfim. Now, I get, you'll see quite a trend. A lot of these fights are dudes in their 40s taking on dudes in their 20s. This is practically a retirement card. This is the UFC saying, we need all these vets, we need to clean them out, we need to get them out. We're going to make them take on young contenders to get them, knock them out, and hype these guys up. This is pretty much what this card is. This card is a retirement card fight, which is why many of them should have been on the Dustin Poirier card. They might as well made that the official retirement card for all these fucking fighters. Now, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is the co-main event, despite being 1-4 in his last 5 fights. He tends to take quite a few years off, like he'll fight once a year for a while, and then he'll take a year off. So he has quite a lot of inactivity to add on to that. 1-4 in his last 5 fights, and he was finished in his last 2. In fact, since the Kevin Holland fight, the barn burner, that was his last That was the last time he had a main event, and since then he didn't have 2 main events, and he got finished in 2 fights that weren't main events, and now he's being rewarded with a co-main event. It makes zero sense why this is the co-main event and why this shouldn't be on another card, like an opener for a fucking UFC pay-per-view, or maybe the opener for a better stacked fucking fight night. Now, Stephen Wonderboy is also 42 years old. It's 2025 and he is the co-main event. Who knows why that is. Now, he fights once a year. Now, Bonfim, there's not a lot of negative to say about Bonfim. He's still very young. I mean, he did get fraud checked by Dalby. Let's be honest. Got fucked up by that Danish dude. I think it's another example of fucking LFA or another promotion privilege. Bonfim has barely been in the UFC, but because he was an LFA champ, I believe, they want to really push him, and they're now giving him a good spot against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. In fact, Bonfim is the only reason why Stephen Thompson is even in a co-main event. Anyway, yeah, so there's this fight. Moving on. Now, Calvin Kattar versus Steve Garcia. Kattar, just like Wonder Boy, is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. Another veteran who they're trying to send out to pasture. His last win was Giga Chikadze, who Giga is now 1-2 in his last couple fights, so that win hasn't really aged well. And there's also the fact that Kattar is very inactive. He fights about once a year. He was out for the entirety of 2023, and he's just not as competitive as he used to be. The Josh Emmett fight was pretty competitive, but since then, since getting dunked on his head by Aljo, he hasn't really been the same. He hasn't been all there getting knocked out by Arnold Allen. Garcia, on the other hand, I understand why they're putting him here. He has good finishes. He, beat Chase Hooper, which was an up-and-coming name at that time, so it makes sense to build up Garcia too, since Chase Hooper's kind of making a comeback since changing weight classes. Now, Nate Lawler versus Morgan Cherry. Now, I actually don't have too much negative shit to say about this matchup, because this is not a bad matchup. It's actually makes sense. It's well placed in the card, I would say. Maybe could be the opener. But it's a well-placed fight, and I think it should maybe be more prelim over main event. Nate Lawler on a main event. I get it. Who knows? They're both coming off of losses too. So, but either way, it's a good matchup. I think both of these guys, there'll probably be a good finish in this fight. I'm hoping there's a good finish in that fight. All right. Petrino versus Lane. So, Austin Lane is 1-3-1 since joining the UFC. And he's lost to Tafa. He's lost to fucking Tafa. All right, to one of the Tafa brothers. Who we're going to get to the Tafa brothers soon, and their fucking annoying shit that we've been having to suffer through their fights, the Tafa brothers. But he lost to Tafa. I don't even know which fucking brother, if it was Justin or the other fat fuck with the mustache, who knows. But there's that. And there's also Petrino. Now, Petrino not only got fraud checked by Anthony Smith, but also Dustin Jacoby. He has 2 losses in a row, and now he's being put on a main card. And he was finished both times in those losses, and he's being rewarded with this Justin Petrino. Justin Petrino, in my opinion, when you are a prospect and then you lose 2 fights in a row and you're finished in both of those fights, you should be put down to the prelims, in my opinion. All right. Now, moving on, I believe this is the last one we're really going to talk about. I'm not even going to get into the prelim, even though at this point we see in these fights down here, they might as well have just put Chris Curtis and Max Griffin on the main card. If you're going to stack the fucking card like this, you might as well put Chris Curtis on the fucking main card. Now, Junior Tafa. Now, I don't know if it's Junior. No, this one's Junior. Sorry. Who knows? Because when one of these motherfuckers gets injured or pulls out of a fight, they just send the brother. It's one of these fucking brothers filling in for each other. Now, Tafa's 2-3 since entering the fucking UFC. He's withdrawn twice, 5 canceled bouts in total. Not all are his fault, as I said. He's withdrawn twice. And also, it's just, I think, in my opinion, it's just annoying at this point to continuously see the Tafa brothers on main cards and shit when they're not even that big fan. Like, unless you're New Zealand or maybe some Australian fans, who gives a fuck about the Tafa brothers? Honestly, who cares? He's being rewarded with main card spots. I feel like it's CKB privilege, City Kickboxing, just getting favoritism because he's friends with Adesanya. Now, Chukos has no UFC wins. There's actually no excuse for this guy to even be on a fucking main card. No UFC wins. He's lost twice since entering, and this guy's like an early prelim fighter, in my opinion. He should be put on the early prelims of a fight. Anyway, yeah, tell me what you guys think about this card. Do you think it might actually be a good card? Do you think I'm just exaggerating? Or do you agree with the narrative going around right now, which is this is a terrible main event, and the rest of this main card is not very good either, stacked with a lot of people who are not even ranked, and if they are ranked, they're ranked near the bottom of the division. In my opinion, I think a good fight night card should have a title eliminator. I feel like it should, because obviously there's not going to be a belt on the line for a fight night, but there could be a title eliminator or a gimmick fight. This is the time to do gimmick fights, like with Covington and Masvidal. That should have been a fucking fight night because that's like a gimmick fight because they have a lot of beef. With this main event, you get neither of that. No title elimination and not even any animosity or anything fucking interesting. This 40-year-old Derek Lewis. This is 2025 and Derek Lewis is headlining an event. All right. Thank you guys for liking. Please subscribe.